but we got here. So what this comes from, this quote by Marx. It's a letter from Marx to someone named Arnold Rouge, and it's in regard to Arnold had already written Marx and was talking about how they're no longer Christian, that they're becoming an atheist. Okay, and then Marx is responding to
Also,
that.
this is 1843, and Marx is 25.
Yep,
So this is an edgy 25-year-old sending a letter.
I would argue that it's still a pretty base letter, and we'll get to it. But I mean, it's really short. It's really short. But we'll walk through this. So this is where, again, I want to reiterate that we got one mention of it here. James Lindsay and Michael O'Fallon and all the other people that are on the right wing that interview James always reference this quote. It's some sort of gotcha that like Marxism is so perverse. They're going to do a ruthless critique on everything. They're evil and they're ruthless and they're going to critique everything. It comes from this. So we'll see. We'll see how ruthless a critique Marx is talking about. Okay? So he's responding to his friend and he goes, I am very pleased to find you so resolute and to see your thoughts turning away from the past and towards a new enterprise. So you've left your religion, you're becoming an atheist. Congratulations. In Paris, then, the ancient bastion of philosophy, and he says something, absit omen, and the modern capital of the modern world, whatever is necessary adapts itself, although I do not underestimate the obstacles. Therefore, I have no doubt that they can be overcome. So even though there's obstacles, you can overcome them. Congratulations, you're an atheist. Okay? And then he goes, our enterprise may or may not come about, but in any event, I shall be in Paris by the end of the month at the very air here turns one into a serf, and I can see no opening for free activity in Germany. So he's still hopeful about the political activism that he's involved with, but he has to leave. He has to leave Germany, basically, because Germany is becoming oppressive right now and cracking down on him for his activities. In Germany, everything is suppressed by force, a veritable anarchy of the spirit, a reign of stupidity itself has come upon us as Zurich obeys orders from Berlin. It is becoming clearer every day that the independent, thinking people must seek out a new center. I am convinced that our plan would satisfy a real need, and real needs must be satisfied in reality. I shall have no doubts once again begin in earnest. So notice here, like, what's interesting about this is Marx is being like pro-free speech here. Illiberal Marx, who wants to suppress us all, is talking about how he's being suppressed for speaking and is going to somewhere where it's a little bit more lax and where he can speak freely. Isn't that funny? I thought Marx was wanting to suppress other people's speech, you know? In fact, the internal obstacles seem almost greater than external difficulties. So this is interesting. He's now going to reflect on the movement itself. Rather than the oppressive forces that are fighting us, there seems to be some internal struggles that are difficult. For even though the question where from presents no problems, the question where to is a rich source of confusion. Not only has universal anarchy broken out among the reformers, but also every individual must admit to himself that he has no precise idea about what ought to happen. However, this very defect turns to the advantage of the new movement, for it means that we do not anticipate the world with our dogmas, but instead attempt to discover the new world through the critique of the old. So what he's saying is that we don't necessarily know what the end result is of our emancipatory struggle. We know why we wanted emancipatory struggle, but we don't know exactly where it's going. But that's at our advantage because we're kind of going with the flow because we do know why it's happening, basically, right? And we get it because we're critiquing the old world, like the world that we currently live in, but also the old world. So we're leaving religion, going to atheism. We're leaving capitalism, going to communism, right? Hitherto, philosophers have left the keys to all riddles in their desks, and the stupid, uninitiated world had only to wait around for the roasted pigeons of absolute science to fly into its open mouth. That line, I have no clue what he's saying, but it's amazing.
The two philosophers have left the keys to all riddles in their desks, and the stupid, uninitiated world had only to wait around for the roasted pigeons of absolute science to fly into its open mouth.
It's a beautiful sentence.
Yeah, I fucking love. He's a shit writer when he wants to write, but he's really good at writing when he's just like doing it for fun.
Yeah. There's probably some metaphor in there that like speaks to the time that like we're missing the context somehow, but
I
that's a
mean,
hilarious sentence.
philosophers have left the keys to all riddles in their desks, so
They're
they're keeping their
idealists.
notes.
Yeah. They're
Well, they're keeping their
theorists.
notes, and they're not
Yeah.
like using them to change the world. They're using them to look at things. Like it's a more fun phrasing of his other quote. I don't even remember what from. I think maybe The Poverty of Philosophy, where it's like, and I guess yeah, the next sentence kind of
Yeah,
gets into it as
because it's
well.
talking
But
about like
like,
the sort of like religious idea of like there's this like temple of theorists up there, but they keep it all to themselves and they don't share it with the people, the struggling masses. You know?
yeah, like that quote. Hitherto, the philosophers have only analyzed the world. The point, however, is to change it. Like,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that is in Problems of Philosophy. So then he goes, philosophy has now become secularized, and the most striking proof of this can be seen in the way that philosophical consciousness has joined battle not only outwardly, but inwardly too. If we have no business with the construction of the future or with organizing it for all time, there can still be no doubt about the task confronting us at present. The ruthless criticism of the existing order. Ruthless in that it will shrink neither from its own discoveries nor from the conflict with the powers that be. I
nice.
I do find it interesting in what he's saying here because there's an aspect in which he's making a sort of analogy with the emancipatory struggle generally in terms of like moving away from capitalism towards communism, but also in terms of this Arnold person leaving his religious belief and going towards atheism, right? A little bit ironic given what we just listened to James Lindsay talk about, and then to somehow use this as a criticism of atheism when Marx is making a clearly atheistic point here to a certain extent, you know? Just a weird
Mhm.
irony. Uh, but also what he's saying here is like pretty clear, and we're gonna get it. He's gonna discuss more about what this like consciousness stuff means in a second. But it's clear here that what he wants to like we need to critique the existing system and ruthlessly because uh, in the sense that like we can't we can't just hide away from what we discover and pretend like it's not happening and do nothing. We need to like come into conflict with the power. We need to fight it because that's a part of our emancipatory struggle, right?
It's also really interesting because like the if we have no business with the construction or the future or with organizing it for all time, like openly stating like, yeah, we don't know for sure how things will look. And also we know that whatever comes next will not be the end of history. And the precog critique of Francis Fukuyama
Yeah,
150 years before
yeah.
Fukuyama wrote his book. But it's like, it is a acceptance that like even like post-capitalism, and communism will not be the end of human history. There is no end.
Yeah.
Like,
I do love Edward Said had a really a great comment in a lecture he was giving talking about the clashless civilizations, and he said he was talking about Fukuyama writing the end of history. That he paused for a few seconds after mentioning Fukuyama and the end of history, and he goes, "I guess that's the end of Fukuyama."
ladies and gentlemen, Saeed got him.
Yeah. So moving on. I am therefore not in favor of our hoisting a dogmatic banner. Quite the reverse. We must try to help the dogmatists to clarify their ideas. In particular, Communism is a dogmatic abstraction, and by communism, I do not refer to some imagined possible communism, but to communism as it actually exists in the teaching of Cabet, Desami, and Waitling, etc. This communism is itself only a particular manifestation of the humanistic principle and is infected by its opposite, private property. The abolition of private property is therefore by no means identical with communism, and communism has seen other socialist theories, such as those of Fourier and Proudhon, rising up in opposition to it,
Yeah.
not fortuitously but necessarily, because it is only a particular one-sided realization of the principle of socialism. So he's arguing that there's like squabbles within within the communistic movement, right? And there's something about like these fights can help clarify our ideas, right? And by the same token, the whole principle of socialism is concerned only with one side, namely the reality of the true existence of man. Okay? That's interesting for people who like to claim that there's no talk about objectivity. But what Marx is getting at here, the idea of like the reality of the true existence of man, is emancipation, right? We're not emancipated yet. Man is not truly realized yet. So socialism concerns itself with emancipation, right? We have also to concern ourselves with the other side, i.e., with man's theoretical existence, and make his religion and science, etc., into the object of our criticism. Furthermore, we wish to influence our contemporaries above all. The problem is how best to achieve this, right? So there's all these things that exist that need critiquing, and we live in a world with other people. How do we somehow convince people to our side that we need to critique these things and move past it to realize the true existence of man? And I guess gendered language, right? The period of time. The problem is how best to achieve this. In this context, there are two incontestable facts. Both religion and politics are matters of the very first importance in contemporary Germany. Our task must be to latch onto these, as they are not to oppose them with any ready-made system such as, and then he lists some French book. Okay, so the idea is he's saying here is like you're not just going to convince these people by going like, I have these arcane theories. We got the book. We're dogmatic. These are our principles. Follow them. Boom. You know. Reason has always existed, but not always in a rational form. Hence, the critic can take his cue from every existing form of theoretical and practical consciousness, and from this ideal and final goal implicit in the actual forms of existing reality, he can deduce a true reality. Now, as far as real life is concerned, it is precisely the political state which contains the postulates of reason in all its modern forms, even where it has not been the conscious repository of socialist requirements. But it does not stop there. It consistently assumed that reason has been realized, and just as consistently, it becomes embroiled at every point in a conflict between its ideal vocation and its actually existing premises. So he's talking about, like, this is kind of getting into a kind of like a hegemonic idea, but the idea is this is the notion of false consciousness, right? That a lot of people think that they've reached the end of history or the end of theorizing, that the order that exists today is the order that will always exist. And part of what you do is you need to communicate with people to realize that, like, no, problems still exist, you know? This internecine conflict within the political state enables us to infer the social truth. Just as religion is the table of contents of the theoretical struggles of mankind, so the political state enumerates its practical struggles. Thus, the particular form and nature of the political state contains all social struggles, needs, and truths within itself. It is therefore anything but beneath its dignity to make even the most specialized political problem, such as this distinction between the representative system and the estate system. Right? This is just the change of systems over time into an object of its criticism. For this problem only expresses at the political level the distinction between the rule of man and the rule of private property. Hence, the critic not only can, but must concern himself with these political questions, right? The practical struggle. which the crude socialists find entirely beneath their dignity. So he's talking about that there's these theoretician socialists that want to sit on top of their perch, keep all their theory to themselves, and not really engage in the practical struggle, the political struggle of getting people engaged, right? By demonstrating the superiority of the representative system over the estate system, he will interest a great party in practice. By raising the representative system from its political form to a general one, and by demonstrating the true significance underlying it, he will force this party to transcend itself, where its victory is also its defeat. So the idea is like it's like armchair. He's criticizing armchair philosophy here. That these people are sitting in their towers just theorizing about this thing and are like, therefore we're done. We've defeated the order that currently exists because we could think of a better society, even though they're doing nothing to actually achieve this better society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing prevents us, therefore, from lining our criticism with a criticism of politics, from taking sides in politics, i.e., from entering into real struggles and identifying ourselves within them. This does not mean that we shall confront the world with new doctrinaire principles and proclaim, here is the truth, on your knees before it. It means that we shall develop for the world new principles from the existing principles of the world. We shall not say, abandon your struggles. They are mere folly. Let us provide you with true campaign slogans. Instead, we shall simply show the world why it's struggling, and consciousness of this is a thing it must acquire, whether it wishes it or not. Now, this is something that when I read this like speaks to me so clearly. I've made this critique several times on the channel about all these people that want to come in and try to like slogan police things like Black Lives Matter. Like, well, should you say defund or should you say this? And like, maybe this is a better slogan. And this is the type of people that Marx is criticizing here. These people who just like sit on their asses and theorize and think that they have all the better explanation. When he's like, no, what you should be doing is going out on the street and explaining to people why they're in the situation they're in right now. So, I mean, this is like similar to the criticisms we were talking about earlier about like Marcuse, like 2 hours ago or whatever, how long ago it was that we were talking about this, which is like what Marcuse would have been criticizing. James Lindsay makes it sound like these people are happy workers, and if not for the fact that people were like tell them that no, you're not actually happy, you're sad, they wouldn't be actually sad. They would remain happy if you just left them alone. But the reality is these people are destitute, depressed workers. But they often don't know, and like I'm saying that as the royal we, because this could apply to me myself. You don't always know why it is that things suck. And so what he's saying is the point is you educate people about what the causes are. This is the cause of why you feel so empty and sad and why you're still poor and why you're still getting fucked over. This is why, right? And by giving them that information, that's what's going to get them on board. It's going to remove their false consciousness, their sense that this is just the normal way things should be, and realize that no, things can be better. We can strive for better. That we can make a change. We can get together. We could organize. We could fight this thing by by showing people why it is that they're in the position that they're in. I love that. The reform of consciousness consists entirely in making the world aware of its own consciousness and arousing it from its dream of itself and explaining its own actions to it. Like Feuerbach's critique of religion, our whole aim can only be to translate religious and political problems into their self-conscious human form. Our program must be the reform of consciousness, not through dogmas, but by analyzing mystical consciousness obscure to itself, whether it appear in religious or political form. It will then become plain that the world has long since dreamed of something of which it needs only to become conscious for it to possess it in reality. It will then become plain that our task is not to draw a sharp mental line between past and future, but to complete the thought of the past. Lastly, it will become plain that mankind will not begin any new work, but will consciously bring about the completion of its old work. Right? So all these struggles, it's an ongoing thing, and we're just constantly completing the struggles of the past. finding ways to overcome it, to become consciously aware of the problems and then solve them.
The weight of all dead generations weighs on the minds of the living like a nightmare, or whatever. What the fuck is that quote? God, it's so good.
Is that Marx? Or is that someone else? Okay.
That's Marx. It was in the 18th Brumaire of Napoleon Bonaparte.
We are therefore.
You finished the reading, and I'm gonna find the quote.
Yeah, we got one. I think this is the last two sentences. We are therefore in a position to sum up the credo of our journal in a single word: the self-clarification, and in brackets critical philosophy, of the struggles and wishes of the age. This is a task for the world and for us. It can succeed only as the product of united efforts. What is needed above all is a confession, and nothing more than that. To obtain forgiveness for its sin, mankind needs only to declare them for what they are. So you can relieve your sin of the past by describing what they are so that you can overcome your false consciousness, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like, it's amazing that they really, really focus on this line. This one sentence, the ruthless criticism of the existing order. And they usually translate this as Marx saying that we must critique everything, right? But it's like, yes, critique the existing order. I mean, it's amazing to me. Like, obviously conservatives are going to react to this, right? Because like criticizing the existing order, no, that's chaos. That's bad. Order, good. Or everything must remain the same. Criticism, bad. But like, it's coming from James, who admitted that like the struggle against Christian supremacy was good and important. And Marx was writing this in the context of overcoming religious persecution and pressure. I mean, he was relating it, analogizing it with political struggle as well. But it's like they're both in and of the same, because they're critiquing these old hegemonic powers and finding ways to solve the problem of false consciousness and getting people aware of why they're miserable and how to then overcome it and emancipate themselves so that they can truly realize who they are by being free, actual freedom, you know, not this liberal fake freedom that we all exist in today. This is my lecture. What was that? Sorry?
Got the quote. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. And just as they seem to be occupied with revolutionizing themselves and things, creating something that did not exist before, precisely in such epochs of revolutionary crisis, they anxiously conjure up the spirits of the past to their service, borrowing from them names, battle slogans, and costumes, in order to present this new scene in world history in time-honored disguise and borrowed language.
Nice.
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.